Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another episode of It's Poppin', where we talk about everything pop-up camper related. So this is a super exciting video because we're going to be going over how to get your pop-up camper ready for camping for the first time. Now, unfortunately this year we're a little late, later in the season because our state parks had just reopened, but nevertheless a really exciting video. So here's what I recommend ultimately, is that you take a look at your specific pop-up camper model and year, the owner's manual, so that way you can see exactly what their recommendations are. This is a 2008 StarCraft 2409. So this is essentially what StarCraft recommends to do to get your pop-up camper ready to go camping for the first time. So take it for what you will, but this is what we do to get it ready to go camping. And most of it's pretty generalizable across the spectrum of pop-ups.
Okay, so the first thing I like to do is ensure that the tires are inflated to their proper PSI. Ours call for a maximum of 65 PSI, so I'm gonna get these top back up. And don't forget your spare, if you have a spare tire on the back, just in case. I'm gonna get these topped up and then we'll go from there. So let's see here. These should be pretty good because our pop-up stays in our garage and I'm able to fill it up throughout the year. These just need a touch of air. Perfect. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is ensure that the lug nuts are torqued down to their proper specs. So once again, this is totally gonna depend on what your specific pop-up camper requires, but make sure these are torqued down so those wheels don't fall off while you're en route. Alright, so I'm going to go around and do this to the other wheel. So the next thing I recommend doing is making sure you have a fresh coat of wheel bearing grease on your wheel bearings. At least for StarCraft, they recommend to grease the wheel bearings every year or every 10,000 miles. So we just re-greased these last fall, so we're not going to do it quite yet. But what we do is we use this high temp grease, such as this. And the other good thing you can use this for is greasing the coupler ball joint. All right, so this is definitely a kind of a dirty job putting the high temp grease on the coupler. Definitely recommend a glove when you go and do this, but take a nice glob like this and just do it to it, I guess. This just ensures that your hitch and the coupler right here are well lubricated. See, like I said, that's a dirty job.
Okay, so the next thing I recommend is lubricating the bed rail slides as well as the roof rail slides. So as you can see behind me, we've got this roof rail slide, and I've got the slide itself with a piece of cardboard behind it. That way you protect your canvas material from that silicone spray. So all I'm going to do on each of these is spray some of that 100% silicone spray. Here is what we use right here, and that way you ensure that those all move freely when you're taking your beds in and out and when you're cranking your roof up.
So now we're just on the inside of the pop-up, and as you can see, this is where the bed rails slide in when the pop-up's closed up. So I'm just going to hit these from the inside as well. Okay guys, so now that all the bed rails and roof rails are siliconed up, there's a few things that you should just check to make sure they're looking okay. First thing is the silicone caulk in the at the roof corners and edges, along with the side box edges. Just making sure that those aren't cracked or dry rotted or whatever, and where they might potentially let in some water. Some other good things to check while you're at it is the propane tank level. If you need to get that refilled, or if you do a propane tank exchange. Also take a look at your battery fluid levels if you have one of those deep cycle batteries, especially if you're going to be doing some dry camping where you're not hooked up to electrical. Furthermore, take a look at the brake linings if you have either hydraulic brakes or electric brakes on your pop-up. Those are just a few things, make sure they're in good working order, make sure they're topped off before you head out. All right, so just a light oil on the cable shaft drive bolt, along with the brake shaft bolt and also the pawl pivot shafts, which at least in our case is up at the tongue of the camper where the roof raising mechanism is. So I'll just, like I said, just throw a light oil on there, WD-40 or any multi-purpose lubricant. Yeah, it's kind of a tough shot, but hopefully. All right, so moving on. This is another difficult spot to film, but this is the master tube for the lifting system, and as you can see, there's a grease joint. This is, of course, underneath the camper, just in front of the axle and the water holding tank. But this just requires some multi-purpose grease at that in the master tube for the lifting system. Okay, so welcome back inside the pop-up. Next thing I like to do is make sure it's clean. Undoubtedly, you'll find some leftover leaves or grass or dirt or whatever from the last time you went pop-up camping. So I'll do a quick vacuum and just wipe down all the surfaces, and that way it's nice and clean for when you get out to wherever you're going. So now everything's been wiped down and vacuumed out, looking pretty good. So the next thing I like to do is just make sure all the appliances or amenities work. For us, that includes like the propane stove. We have both an indoor and an outdoor one. We have a propane furnace, the air conditioner. We have also, all the outlets. You might want to, plug in a cell phone charger or something to make sure all those work. And then we also have a whole plumbing system essentially, and that consists of a hot water heater. We have a shower. We have a sink, and then those also can work off the onboard water tank, which sits underneath the camper, which is then pumped with a water pump if you're not connected to city water. But in order to test out the plumbing system, I'm gonna have to flush out the antifreeze that we have in the holding tank and pump through all the lines. So in order to do that, I'm gonna have to close up the pop-up, pull it out, and flush out that antifreeze before we can make sure everything else is up and running. All right, guys, so we're gonna flush out the antifreeze out of the water holding tank and the line. So we're just going to hook up the hose to the city water line and flush out all that antifreeze. All right, so we're going to empty the holding tank as well.
Alright, so now we switched the hose from the city inlet to just the water holding tank, and we're flushing more of that antifreeze out. Alright, pumps on. There it comes. There's that antifreeze. So we're doing the same thing on the shower as well, just to flush out any antifreeze in the lines. Alright, so I believe there's just one last appliance to make sure it works, and that's the water heater. So now that we got the water system all flushed out, we're just going to make sure this works right quick. And by doing that, turn on the pilot, light the pilot, which it is. Hold that down for a second and make sure she turns on. So the last thing we're doing is just filling up the cassette toilet. You can kind of see the water line going up slowly over there, and once it hits the top, you know your cassette toilet is full and ready to go. All right guys, so as you can see, the pop-up is all packed up and ready to go. Hopefully we'll see you out there camping.